In October 2019, just a couple months before the arrival of COVID-19, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in cooperation with the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and the World Economics Forum, hosted Event 201, a 3.5-hour tabletop exercise that simulated a series of dramatic scenarios relating to a hypothetical pandemic. Strangely enough, this exercise was about a novel coronavirus that would kill millions. Nearly 8 weeks after the simulation, an outbreak of a novel coronavirus turned into a reality in China. At least, that's what we're told. Okay, so this idea of a digital certificate to store medical information, including vaccines received, is currently in the works as part of a massive project called ID 2020, which is backed by the United Nations, the Rockefeller Foundation, and Microsoft. ID 2020 is developing a digital identification system that will store a wealth of personal information and will transcend the barriers of national governments. The official website of ID 2020 states that a global digital identity is necessary to keep track of refugees and ID-less people in developing countries. Of course, people in developed countries will be ID'd as well. The website states, "We need to get digital ID right. Unfortunately, current models of digital ID do not meet everyone's needs. They are generally archaic, insecure, lacking adequate privacy protection, and for over 1 billion people worldwide, unavailable. Everyone should have access to a digital ID that enables them to prove who they are across institutional and international borders and across time, while giving them control over how their personal information is collected, used, and shared." In an article published by ID 2020 in 2018, vaccines are the perfect way to introduce digital identity to the world, especially infants. Appropriately titled, "Immunization an Entry Point for Digital Identity," another form of embedded vaccine identification that Bill Gates has been funding research on is the quantum dot tattoo. In December 2019, a group of researchers at MIT published a study in Science Translational Medicine about the use of quantum dot tattoos to identify people who received a vaccine. An article in Futurism titled, "An Invisible Quantum Dot Tattoo Could Be Used to ID Vaccinated Kids," reviewed this study. For the people overseeing nationwide vaccination initiatives in developing countries, keeping track of who had which vaccinations and when can be a tough task. But researchers from MIT might have a solution. They've created an ink that can be safely embedded in the skin alongside the vaccine itself, and it's only visible using a special smartphone camera app and filter. In other words, they've found a covert way to embed the record of a vaccination directly in the patient's skin rather than documenting it electronically or on paper, and their low-risk tracking system could greatly simplify the process of maintaining accurate vaccine records, especially on a larger scale. The invisible tattoo accompanying the vaccine is a pattern made up of minuscule quantum dots, tiny semiconducting crystals that reflect light, that glow under infrared light. The pattern and vaccine gets delivered into the skin using high-tech dissolvable microneedles made of a mixture of polymers and sugar. It's possible someday that this invisible approach could create new possibilities for data storage, biosensing, and vaccine applications that could improve how medical care is provided, particularly in the developing world. Before I continue, let me mention that there is a debate among Christians and Bible scholars as to what the mark of the beast really is. Some believe it's technology such as a microchip that will grant you an identity within the beast system, allowing you to participate in basic societal functions like the right to buy and sell goods. Others believe the mark to be metaphorical, and receiving the mark on your forehead is akin to following the counterfeit system of worship with your mind, while the mark on the right hand is analogous to indicating the false god you serve with your actions. The most upvoted reply highlights the similarities between Gates' solution and the mark of the beast in the Bible.
Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. and his number is 666.
Earlier, I briefly mentioned how the Rockefeller Foundation is a financial backer of Project ID 2020. The Rockefeller Foundation published a report called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. It's a scenario planning exercise that goes over hypothetical crisis situations, and one of them is a global pandemic. One of the 4 narratives in the book is titled Lockstep, subtitled A World of Tighter Top-Down Government Control and More Authoritarian Leadership with Limited Innovation and Growing Citizen Pushback. I'm going to read some of this, but keep in mind that this was published in 2010, so obviously it was written in the same year or even earlier. But it starts off, in 2012, the pandemic that the world had been anticipating for years finally hit. Unlike 2009's H1N1, this new influenza strain originating from wild geese was extremely virulent and deadly. Even the most pandemic-prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus streaked around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months. The majority of them healthy young adults. The pandemic also had a deadly effect on economies. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt, debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. Even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers. The pandemic blanketed the planet. Though disproportionate numbers died in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Central America, where the virus spread like wildfire in the absence of official containment protocols. But even in developed countries, containment was a challenge. The United States' initial policy of strongly discouraging citizens from flying proved deadly in its leniency, accelerating the spread of the virus not just within the US, but across borders. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. In order to protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems, from pandemics and transnational terrorism to environmental crises and rising poverty, leaders around the world took a firmer grip on power. The Club of Rome is a powerful collection of international elites who claim to serve humanity as a premier environmental think tank and consultants to the United Nations. Here's a quote from a book written by the club's co-founder. The Club of Rome is part of the overall process taking place to fulfill the United Nations Agenda 2030. Formerly known as Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 is the draconian master plan adopted in 2015 that parades as a Save the World campaign, when in fact, it's the blueprint that brings about the implementation of the One World Order. If you look at this chart that I made here, you can see the goals as given by the United Nations and what the goals actually mean on the bottom. A few of these goals are definitely already accomplished, and it's just a matter of time before the rest are completed. I mean, we only have 10 years until 2030. They have the megacities mapped already on a website called america2050.org, along with the Trans-American Passenger Network to travel to and from these megacities. The cities are going to be laced with smart meters, smart poles, 5G, and whatever comes after, 6G, 7G, 8G. People are going to be tracked from the cradle to the grave with microchip implants that digitally store everything there is to know about them, including their finances and their ability to make transactions. That's why I tend to think that the microchip might be the mark of the beast. It says no one can buy or sell unless they have the mark. People all over the world are doing experimental microchipping. Not to mention what's happening now with ID 2020. We're also moving towards a cashless society with every day that passes. This pandemic is carrying multiple agendas forward. the push for centralized control of information, which is censorship and narrative control, the cashless agenda forming out of the economic crash taking place right now, and the fear of passing germs through the use of physical money, martial law quarantines, mandatory vaccination, and digital identification via microchipping. This situation is the biggest show of force and seizure of power that anyone alive today has ever seen in their lifetime. This is very serious. Life is not going back to normal ever again.
So this is where the microchip implant story begins.
You will be chipped, it's just a matter of time. A small firm recently embedded microchips in their employees as a way to bypass company badges and corporate logons and to get attention for their cafeteria kiosks, which are available on a cashless payment plan like Apple Pay.
The latest office innovation is a microchip implanted in the skin and designed to replace the traditional keypad for opening doors, using the copier, even buying food in the cafeteria.
Employees at a vending company are going from the assembly line to front of the pack to get microchipped.
Do you think this is the future?
It is the future, and we look at this as being responsible.
The implant, which has been FDA approved, is the size of a grain of rice and is injected under the skin between the thumb and index finger by a licensed piercer.
I think it's the wave of the future that we'll all have implanted chips that have our medical records.
So you would do it?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, you're carrying around a phone anyway.
This is a microchipping party. Hannah's getting an electronic chip implanted into her hand.
So congratulations, Hannah.
Thank you.
You've been chipped?
Yes, I have.
How does it feel?
It feels good. I'm excited to see what I'll be able to do now.
Can I touch it?
Yeah, you can feel it there. I feel like this is the future. It's the next big thing that's gonna happen.
A tiny microchip like this inserted just beneath the skin in their hands.
This technology will, one day, change the way we live. But in the future, we will all be chipped.
In Sweden, the microchips are already here.
The microchip implants use the same technology that's in contactless credit cards,
which have made cash pretty much obsolete in Sweden.
No cash.
Is a cashless society inevitable? How long will it take before we're cashless?
Many countries are fast moving towards a cashless society.
Between 2000 and 2015, non-cash payments in the U.S. grew by almost 400%. Venmo, the mobile app where people can pay each other on a smartphone, now processes $2 billion a month. This year, Apple added similar payment capabilities in iMessage. These free services are so popular, 30 major banks recently launched a competing product called Zelle.
It would be better if we were more like Sweden, where cash has nearly been phased out. And the U.S. will get there, too, in another 5 or 10 years.
There's no question that cash, is in its last era.
China's cashless revolution has happened in just 3 years.
In order to avoid the risk of transmission through physical handling of money, we encourage the use of cashless transactions, such as mobile money, M-Pesa and otherwise, and credit cards.
Well, health experts say the coronavirus can live on surfaces like cash for up to 10 days. That has many people worried about shopping and other everyday tasks.